You are now entering Voice This. Beware. This podcast contains facts that some listeners may find inspiring and uplifting. Listeners' discretion advised.
Welcome everyone to the first episode of Voice This. I'm your host Millani, and today we're going to be talking to Tim Bettridge. He is one of the co-founders of Voice Tech Global and is currently a senior product designer at Connected. He has delved into the space of voice for a number of years now, and I couldn't think of a better person, a more passionate person even, to not only kickstart our podcast, but to welcome you to the world of conversational AI. So let's get to it. Hey Tim, how's it going?
Very, very good. How are you doing?
Things are good. How have you been spending your quarantine so far?
Oh, I'm keeping busy. I guess it's been a lot of adjustment and figuring things out, but overall, I can't complain. I'm trying to make the most of it and get a lot of work done and enjoying working from home. Overall, it's not bad. I mean, things are pretty controlled in Toronto here in Ontario, so I think we've got it better than our neighbors to the south and some other people around the world. So can't complain.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. For me, I feel like I'm either very productive or not one bit. So it's either I'm 100% or not. So two extremes on my end here, but you know.
I've heard that. Yeah. Like for me, it's just I always put too much on my plate and then I'm like, oh, I got to eat all this food I put on my plate. But like I've also I understand that's a weird analogy, but I also understand the opposite. I think as the months as we're like in month 5 or 6 or something, and as it wears on, people have a bit of COVID fatigue or pandemic fatigue and they're a little bit burnt out. So I'm trying to strike the right balance, and I think that's important. You got to like go for a walk and enjoy some time outside and get some exercise, but also find the balance between work and life, which is harder to do when it all blends together and you're working where you live and living where you work. I think that's the problem is it's hard to know when you're shutting off,
Oh
right?
yeah, no, I agree. It's very interesting to think about like what will happen, when there's that fatigue, like what happens when you burn out? Do you just close off entirely? Where would you go? You can't really go anywhere for vacation. It's just kind of working with what you have. So it's going to be very interesting indeed, for sure. A very interesting way to start the podcast for sure, especially the first episode. But in our times, this is kind of what we're talking about, right? Day in and day out. So let's get started with the episode. Tim, of course, I know who you are, but let's kind of give everybody an introduction and, give us a couple of facts about yourself, who you are, talk a little bit about Voice Tech Global, and just some fun facts about you.
My name's Tim Bettridge. I'm a product designer at a company called Connected, which is a product development firm. It's a professional services company, kind of half consultancy, half dev shop, where we try to kind of help our clients out in their own digital transformations and bring them through the product development process. So I get a chance there to work with a lot of smart people and on a lot of variety of different projects across different industries. And I've been kind of blessed to really explore my passion, which is emergent technologies, and especially conversational AI and conversational interfaces, but also spatial computing and augmented reality and machine learning. So that's kind of my day job. And then I moonlight with Voice Tech Global. I'm one of the co-founders of this community and this platform. So Voice Tech Global is an international community of over 2,400 practitioners, either already working in the voice tech space or people who are aspired to be and want to speed up their learning and meet other like-minded people. And as well as the co-founder at Voice Tech Global, I also direct the Civic Lab, which is a small working group of cross-functional practitioners. We've got engineers and designers and researchers and some people just passionate about sound and technology in general. And Civic Lab is focused on actually hands-on practical learning and building products together, and specifically products that have civic or social value. So products that might be for a nonprofit or can benefit people in our city or around the world. So projects that we're doing kind of now and in the past have been focused around education. We've been collaborating with Toronto Public Library, but we're also looking at a new project which is about recycling and how we can use a voice agent to educate people about the right ways to recycle. So there's quite a range, and it's a weekly kind of hackathon jam where we get together and we build things together. So that's kind of my moonlighting. And then I guess fun facts about me, I really like gardening and houseplants. So I have, I think, like a bit over 80 plants right now in my little apartment. And
What?
yeah, and this year I've been doing a lot of growing from seed, and I have these little greenhouses and growing vegetables. So I have 12 tomato plants at home in an indoor space, and cucumbers and green peas and peppers. And because I grow indoors, I have to act as the bumblebees because I have no pollinators. So I spend about 45 minutes a day gardening in my apartment, just watering different plants on different schedules. And I actually have a little electric toothbrush, which simulates being a bumblebee, and I pollinate all the flowers on all the tomato
Oh my
plants.
god, that is so cool. That is so there's so many cool things you said about
Yeah.
yourself here, but one of your fun facts, wow, I'm blown away. That is awesome. I actually want to take a step back. So you mentioned quite a bit about Civic Lab, which is really cool, and we definitely want to dive in deeper, but I feel like that should be an episode of its own. So listeners, watch out. But I do want to kind of back it up a little bit about when you mentioned conversational AI in terms of your career and also the fact that you're a co-founder for Voice Tech Global. So how did you get introduced to a conversational AI to begin with?
I guess like growing up, I was super into sci-fi in general. I was a Trekkie and really into Star Trek, and I really love the fact that they just talked to their computer and their computer understood them. So, Jean-Luc Picard always says computer, and then what's he, Earl Grey hot is when he gets his tea. But that was kind of the beginning for me of my interest was movies like 2001 Space Odyssey with Hal, the sentient super intelligent computer on board, and Star Trek. And then when I got my job at Connected, and previously I had worked in product development in healthcare, but I hadn't worked in some of these new emergent technologies. I was mainly focused on mobile app development. And at Connected, I was kind of thrown into the fire or the deep end, so to speak, and asked to, begin with my first project there, exploring conversational AI, and taking the process is similar in the beginning phases of kind of user needs understanding and that discovery phase of a project and trying to make sure that we were concepting and designing our solutions from a user-centric perspective, but the interface and trying to find the constraints of that interface and what was possible with that interface, those things were all new to me. A colleague of mine, Mark DePape, gave me a book at the time from MIT Press called Wired for Voice.
Mhm.
But that was interesting. It's an older book. I read through it really quickly. And it was just talking about kind of how voice can activate and advance our relationship with computers
Mhm.
and giving a bit of the background on the history of these interfaces because they're not brand new. We've had them in the form of IVRs and kind of bank and telephone decision tree systems, as well as nascent interfaces in automobiles going back to the early 90s.
Mhm.
So they're not brand new, and there's a lot of history that we can look at to understand them better. But that was kind of where I got my feet wet. And it was an interesting time then because there weren't really tools available to do prototyping or design work and testing. And so we were really kind of figuring things out as we went. And that involved establishing our own ways to do that kind of iterative rapid prototyping and testing, including the development of tools that we worked on, design tools to actually test and validate some of the things that we really wanted to try out before jumping into development. So early on, it was exploring it for different projects with different clients in different spaces, including retail, but also telecom. And then at the same time, developing kind of in parallel an internal design tool that we still use today at Connected, which hasn't been kind of released publicly. It's something that we use for our own purposes called Simile. And so my experience and grounding was in those initial projects. And then everything since then, I've gotten a chance at Connected to work on various voice projects, including in the car space and in the real estate space. And then through Voice Tech Global, it's kind of been, kind of self-fulfilling virtuous cycle of learning, because by being kind of involved in organizing and leading a community of technologists and voice enthusiasts, it's also been a way for me to continue to learn and give back in this cycle. Just because when you're surrounded by people interested in the same thing, you kind of immerse yourself in it. So there's been a lot of learning that's happened through Voice Tech Global as well over the last 3 years.
Well, it's very interesting how like everything kind of panned out from your childhood to the projects that you got to work at Connected, all the way down to the Civic Lab projects that you're working currently right now at Voice Tech Global. Definitely something that we will chat about soon, for sure, for sure. But I did want to get into the meat of the topic for this episode, which is all about conversational AI. So let's throw this question right at you, Tim. What is conversational AI? Did I stump?
No, it's fine. There's several different terms that people use, but conversational AI has kind of become, a pretty popular one. I think defining AI would be important. And, with artificial intelligence, you're basically talking about intelligence that is not natural intelligence that we see in humans and animals, although humans are animals. I think a lot of people conflate AI with machine learning, and that's not always true as well. Artificial intelligence can be rigid as well or predetermined. It's about simulating intelligence. So important, I think, to untangle some of those terms. Personally, I like to make it really clear and talk about terms in more specific ways. So conversational AI to me is kind of an umbrella term, which is useful to talk about it at a high level, but I'll tend to use terms like a conversational user interface or a conversational interface to really kind of disambiguate that from other types of interface, like a spatial computing interface or graphical user interface. So a CUI, sometimes people say VUI is a voice user interface. And then also, like when you're talking about conversational AI, you may be talking about kind of generative language models or open domain language models, like these new chatbots, which are predictive neural nets that can kind of hallucinate with deep learning the next thing they should say. And those are kind of, truly conversational in that sense. And then you also have modern NLU or natural language understanding kind of at the core of the conversational AI revolution that we've been seeing with products like Alexa and Google Assistant. And, when we have modern NLU, we're able to design these interfaces in a way that's much more intuitive and flexible and natural than the previous generation of conversational AI, which would be the IVR banking type of phone systems. So those ones weren't using the same kind of natural language understanding that we have today. So it's really like, if it's a big topic. Conversational AI involves a lot. It's an umbrella term, but it's a good one to use when you're talking about the broader domain of technology and research. And then there's a lot of kind of smaller pieces within that.
Well put, well put. I really like how you defined conversational AI right there. So, question for you then. You mentioned that it's an interface. So, do you also see it as a channel? Where smart speakers are kind of driving that product to the users, or
Yeah, that's kind of where I think conversational AI is too broad of a term,
yeah.
because it it's both of those things. So if you want to talk about it as a channel, I tend to get specific and talk about the platforms themselves. So if you are talking about it as a channel, you want to talk about the skills for Alexa platform or the actions for Google Assistant platform.
Mm-hmm.
And these are essentially that's the directory, the marketplace, and the platform that brings voice product out to people through these main VPAs or virtual personal assistants. So if you want to reach and be a part of that growing market of homes who have a smart speaker, I think it's over 50% of US households and over, I think, 30% of Canadian households have smart speakers now. So if you want to be able to use those as touch points and connect with your customers through a channel, it's just good to know that you are either going to build a skill or an action, and even an understanding kind of market penetration to know, can you reach your customer on one platform or another would be important. But then if we're talking about it as an interface, definitely voice interfaces as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that makes sense. Tim, I want to know more about your favorites in terms of either an application or is there a specific use case? How often do you use smart speakers?
Yeah, so I do use voice quite a bit. I've got in my home let me just count really quickly. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7, 8. I have 8 speakers in
Oh my
a
God.
relatively small apartment.
I was like, what are
So
you
that's
counting? Oh wow. Okay, that's very impressive.
yeah. So some of those are 8. Actually, I just realized 9. Two of those are 3 of those are smart displays, which are smart speakers that have screens, and then the other ones are a mix of Alexas and Google Homes in different flavors. They're different size speakers,
Mm-hmm.
and I have enough that I have a smart speaker in every room, which to me is kind of important if you start using a voice interface and a personal assistant on a really regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
What I found myself doing before I had one in every room is I would yell into the other room to try to like access my smart lighting
Yeah.
or something like this. So, for me it's kind of like Wi-Fi, where when you start using it all the time, you want to available all the time. And so just like people will kind of position their Wi-Fi routers so that they have internet throughout their home, or they might get several different Wi-Fi routers in a mesh network.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of think about it in the same way in my own space. Is I want to have a mesh network. I want to have enough of these together so that I can use it everywhere. So kind of the last place that I ended up getting one was in the bathroom. Once I did, I realized that's actually a wonderful place to have a smart speaker, because when I'm trying to wake up in the morning and get ready for the day and I have a shower, I listen to my daily briefings, which is a media channel for short news snippets on the Google Assistant and Alexa platform. So we'll check the weather and check reminders in my calendar and stuff while I'm in the bathroom, and I need to use voice as an interface because I can't use my phone in the shower, obviously. So it's a nice way for me to kind of wake up and get my day
That
started.
is awesome.
But yeah, to go back to your question, I do use voice a lot. I use it. What I love it for is kind of administrative organization of my life. So I use it on a very regular basis to set reminders for myself, set calendar events, shopping lists. I just find that that's actually a really good life hack. If every time you realize you're running out of something, you just tell your Google Home or your Alexa to add something to your shopping list, add olive oil to my shopping list. Then when you're about to go shopping, you don't have to go and sit down and make a very long list of things and go through all of your cupboards, because you've been doing it, on the go, on the fly.
Right.
And so this is kind of where the ambient quality to recognize when you're trying to understand the use cases for voice interfaces. So a lot of these are just really on the go, quick kind of ad hoc note taking and things like that, but they add up to me having more kind of oversight into my calendar and being able to quickly give myself reminders. I tend to give myself way more reminders now than I ever have because, if you think about really great use cases for voice, the best ones to me allow you to avoid taking out your phone.
Mm-hmm.
Because your phone, involves unlocking this and getting into an app and typing something out and going through several screens. And that's a lot of friction that, actually would prevent me from even bothering with a reminder or a calendar event in many cases.
Mm-hmm.
And, once you do that, you're also liable to check your Instagram and you get into this digital drift of kind of staring at your device.
Yeah.
And so what I really like is feeling, more connected to my real life and the people around me, but still being able to set a reminder for tomorrow or add something to my shopping list and that kind of digital maintenance and organization.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gives me time back in my day and it keeps me a little bit more organized as I've got this kind of virtual personal assistant, which is the one I tend to use more as Google Assistant
Right.
versus Alexa.
That is really cool. A lot of people I know also use it for organizational purposes as well, right? I really liked how you said that we're so used to kind of looking at our screens. We're actually trying to move away from screen time. So voice really helps out with that. Do you think there's other industries that can totally get into the conversational space? And do you think there's people that are killing it right now? What do you think about the industries within conversational AI?
So when we say conversational AI, that includes voice interfaces. It also includes chatbots. And chatbots have been very helpful recently in customer service. There's also a huge opportunity across many different industries, including education, finance, or real estate, or definitely in the automotive space where we've seen conversational interfaces or voice assistants in cars for many years, but they're evolving and improving. In that customer service space that I've seen just over the last few months is real uptick and demand and adoption of chatbots and voice interfaces to kind of help support customers instead of call centers. Call centers have been kind of hit pretty hard in the COVID-19 pandemic because they're, closed indoor spaces where you've got a lot of people working and they're speaking on the phone, which produces aerosols and there are really significant outbreaks and they've had to shut down. In these instances, voice interfaces have kind of had to step in and some cases act as a bit of a triage to kind of support customers. And we've also seen very long wait times on telehealth lines. So there's definitely new kind of pressures and evolving user needs that are new increased demand for conversational interfaces. So I think we're going to see the extraordinary conditions that we're in right now and the COVID-19 pandemic also spur innovation and adoption of conversational interfaces in a wide range of industries.
Do you think there's an industry that hasn't got onto conversational AI that should?
Well, I think like there's an interesting one right now in education.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that way because I feel like with so many students having to do remote kind of virtual education
Mm-hmm.
with schools being closed, and there's a real challenge coming up at the beginning of the school season in September for listeners who may be kind of listening. We're at the beginning of August and there's a lot of discussion about how school is going to function, and across different jurisdictions they're approaching it differently, and in some cases they're going to do in classroom school, but that might not work. I mean, they might cancel it a month after. We just went through several months where students were having to figure out how to get on a Zoom call, and teachers were trying to find ways to give them the same type of classroom experience. But it's been very challenging to do that when you've got 30 10-year-olds on a Zoom call. It's not easy to captivate and capture their attention when they're just distracted digitally and in this unfamiliar context for learning. So I think what's interesting about voice interfaces is they might provide the opportunity to maybe provide more personalized education or one-to-one experiences, whereas kind of a teacher can't always give that individual attention, and especially over a Zoom call it can be maybe even more challenging.
Yeah.
It's not that it should replace the teacher, but it might extend the teacher's capabilities or be a part of a hybrid approach. So I think that we haven't seen a ton of that yet, but that there's a lot of opportunity to kind of support teachers and students with educational experiences.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a very interesting idea, in fact. And especially with younger kids as well, the learning curve, them picking up on voice would actually be so much easier than them trying to understand the platforms that the teachers are trying to get them on in terms of reading or math or whatever it may be. Conversational AI might be an easier approach. So, a question for you, Tim. For people that are trying to get into the space, so we talked a little bit about the industries, what your favorite is, and we kind of talked about the definition of conversational AI. But for someone that's trying to get into conversational AI and understand it, from your experience and what you believe, what do you think the bare bones are?
Well, I mean, there are some excellent resources available from Amazon and Google to just get started. They both have really good design guidelines and development documentation. Really depends on what side of it you want to be involved with, or if you want to be kind of a maker in the truest sense, where you're doing design and development and kind of creating interesting experiments and products. That's one way, is to just start there, start with the actions on Google or the Alexa platforms and the materials provided. They both have some really good design guidelines available as well that have evolved a lot over the last couple of years. But I also think it's really good to learn with others. So I'm a big proponent of working in working groups like Civic Lab. There's also organizations like Civic Tech Toronto and Civic Tech Canada. So you can certainly find like-minded people. There's a lot of resources on the Voice Tech Global website, not to be a shell for Voice Tech Global, but we do have a mandate to kind of build the community and increase education opportunities. You can certainly join Voice Tech Global or look at other communities that are in your locale. I like civic tech meetups and organizations because it's just about kind of purely learning together and building things together that have value in the wider community. And there's a lot of reward involved in building things that have social value and that create impact in the world. So for me, in my day job, I don't always get the opportunity to feel like I'm making that impact or to explore and learn with others, in from a purely curiosity motivation. So I do get that when I build and when I learn with others at Civic Lab. So I'd always suggest kind of looking at what resources are available. There's a lot online right now to look at the development platforms that Google and Amazon have, and then also reaching out and seeing what communities are available virtually to you or in your locale and joining them. And you don't have to have experience to join these communities, and you can just be humble and say, I'm just here to learn and I'm curious, and start attending different seminars and things like that.
Yeah, so it's really just about the learning style of the person. It's either, there's so many resources out there, but if you're the type to kind of get your hands dirty, there's so many organizations, including Voice Tech Global, where you can kind of test out and play for yourself. So that's really, really neat. So I just want to pick your brain a little bit about conversational AI. So do you find that there might be an opinion or a fact that you have that no one agrees regarding conversational AI, something that you always vouch for, but no one believes you?
There's I can get into talking about conversational interfaces with somebody. And then I think there's some kind of knee-jerk reactionary opinions around privacy that aren't really well rooted in the technology and architecture of these products themselves.
Mhm.
So that's one thing. I mean, I not so much when I'm talking about people who are kind of a part of the community, but just kind of in the larger tech community, there are still people who are very wary of how these things work. But if you kind of break it down and understand, how the awake word, which is kind of triggered from an on-device machine learning model that is listening only for that word in order to open this gateway to take in a few seconds of speech from the user and send that off to the cloud. There is a lot of scrutiny involved in kind of securing these products that are ambient computing. They are kind of always listening for that wake word, but that nature of ambient computing makes it easy to kind of be concerned about it. The thing that I kind of remind people of is these are highly scrutinized products that are getting disassembled and tested and torn apart by kind of white hackers and hackers in general to kind of understand and if there are exploits. But
Mhm.
that, the majority of people aren't really concerned about the smartphone in their pocket or their Windows PC or Mac. But these are products that are hacked on a regular basis.
Right.
The a phone knows much more about you than a smart speaker would, or a web cookie that is tracking your browsing patterns, or
Mhm.
an app that is looking at your GPS location and mapping out your behaviors. Like, these are predictive technologies that are much more invasive and have much more potential to be exploited for nefarious purposes than the smart speakers we're seeing wide adoption of. So that's one
Mhm.
thing. I mean, just the privacy angle of it is something that has some people still feeling a little bit anxious about. Understandably, I think it's important to really dig into it a little bit and understand the technology better if you are kind of concerned about it. Because, if you're paranoid about smart speakers listening to you, then you're going to be paranoid all the time because they're getting to be everywhere.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think it's a really valid thing to be wary of, that we're building these devices in a way that is inclusive of different communities, and also that we're cognizant of kind of second or third order consequences and building digital products that are very different than what we've had in the past,
Mhm.
that we are trying to be thoughtful about what we're building and make sure that we're building it in a way that is responsible.
Mhm.
So I guess that's one thing, is I'm always an advocate of that kind of care and thoughtfulness. And I think that in the tech community, there's the old mantra of move fast and break things. Let's get out the MVP and we'll be agile and adapt it as we need. But I think that when we're talking about some very powerful technologies that are only going to increasingly become more and more powerful and disruptive, we need to really be thoughtful and lean on ethicists and experts in these areas to kind of help guide our decision making when we're working in these spaces.
Well said. I really like these points actually. I love how you brought up privacy, which is something that we've all been kind of worried about, some more than others, but I love the fact that you brought up being inclusive. Definitely something that we should all be looking into way more when it comes to conversational AI. One question I wanted to ask you was kind of talking about what the future would look like or what the future of conversational AI would mean.
But I just want to change it up a little bit.
If you were given a magic wand, what part of your day would you want conversational AI to help you with or automate? And I want to know a little bit about where your mind is when it comes to that. So, what would you do with the magic wand?
I think I like the idea of programming with conversation, kind of complex task flows, and having an assistant that I can converse with, and in a natural way that would allow me to automate portions of my life and set up task flows without having to do this with a screened interface.
Mhm.
One thing I really love in the movie Her, when Joaquin Phoenix brings home his new OS for the first time, who is Scarlett Johansson as Samantha,
Mhm.
the first thing she does is, asks him if she can take a look at his email, and then she organizes it. She clears out his email box. I'm one of these terrible people who has thousands of emails in my email box that are unread.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I definitely don't clear out old things. And I kind of like rationalize that to myself. Oh, like I might need it one day, or I can like search back, but it just turns
Yeah.
into this huge pile.
Yeah.
And I loved how Samantha just organized Joaquin's emails in that movie.
Mhm.
So I love this idea of kind of interfaces that have more agency,
Mhm.
that can work with us, that can help make our lives more efficient and more organized, and the agency is important. Right now our voice interfaces are reactive, and you always have to invoke Alexa or Google Assistant. They're not you know proactively reaching out to you and saying, hey, like I remember we were talking about this last week, and I found this and I think it would be interesting to you. I would really like it in the future if our voice assistants were better conversationalists, maybe could carry on a bit more banter and chit chat,
Mhm.
but also if they could proactively kind of reach out to me to help and assist me in my life. I think that those are all kind of good aspirational goals to work towards.
I love that. Tim, I want that right now. I want someone to go through my email and clean it up because I am exactly where you're at too. My email, I don't even want to know what I have in there, how many years it's been in there. I don't even want to know. So that's actually a really, really cool idea that you got there. But anyway, this was so awesome, Tim. With that, we actually conclude our first episode. I just want to say thank you, Tim, for spending time answering my questions and sharing your experiences and jumpstarting this new podcast. And before we go, do you have any last words?
Just everybody be safe, enjoy the rest of the summer, connect with your friends and family while the weather is great. And for parents who've got kids going into the school semester, try to relax. I know it's scary. Trust on your public health officials. We started with a bit of a COVID chat, so I just wanted to finish on that note. This is just a bump in the road. We've got another season to go maybe, but we're heading into 2021. 2020 will end eventually, and next year is going to be great. Don't even worry about
You said it. It better happen, Tim. It better happen.
it.
But awesome. Thank you so much. I think with that, we're good to go then. Thank you.
Bye, Milani.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to the first episode of Voice This. I had such a great time speaking with Tim, and I loved all the thoughtful analogies he shared with us today. But at this rate, I feel like he's gonna have more smart speakers than plants, but you know what? Let's just give it some time. If you like what you heard, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast player and be notified for new episodes. This is Millani, and you've been listening to Voice This.